I'm going to start another recording, and I'm just going to do some really, really basic syntax stuff with JavaScript. If you guys have questions or want me to go over something again or whatever, just let me know. Um, and yeah, I'll just get started. Um, so let me go back to the browser. Okay, so just getting started really, really basic. So remember in JavaScript, something that we can do is write a comment, and a comment is not code. It's something that's just meant for the developers to be able to read to understand what's happening in the program. You can see there's comments all over the place in the stuff that Glitch has created for us. If I go to like the index page, there's these comments that are telling us what's on the page, and this is a good example of a place where a comment is useful for a service like Glitch, that maybe is just getting used for the first time by somebody who's never written code before. They have all these nice comments explaining what everything is doing. Um, so my JavaScript programs always start with a comment at the top. I usually do like a multi-line comment, which I can create by using a forward slash and a star or asterisk to start, and then I can write anything I want for as many lines as I want to, and then I do the opposite, a star, and then a forward slash to end it. And so once I start this, it doesn't have to be multi-line. I can, write stuff here, but usually I put this on the next line, and anything I write in between here, uh, it's not code, so it really doesn't matter how it's written. The computer is just going to ignore it. This is just for other developers to see what it looks like, for me in the future to remember what the heck I was doing when I was writing this code, because a lot of times you won't remember. So yeah, it's just really basic setup. So this is a comment, and let's see. Uh, what else do we want to put? So this is so usually I'll explain what's going on. So um, this is a demo script for MMP 310. Sometimes I'll put the author by Owen Roberts. Often I'll put the date. It's useful just for me to remember when was I doing this. So today is the 31st. 2022. I might add other notes in here as I add more to my program. So comments are really, really important. In 210, I always had comments as part of the grade. So if you didn't have a lot of comments or any comments, you would lose points on that. It can seem like it's not that useful because you can still run your code without a comment. But if you're ever like applying for a job and somebody's looking at your code and you don't have comments, there's like zero chance that you will get that job unless it's like some crazy weird situation. Because it's just really, really important to be able to write good comments and to use good, uh, you know, commenting in your code. Sometimes you'll see comments that look like this, where they'll actually put a star at the beginning of every line, like that. A lot of the P5 code actually looks like that. Uh, I don't really like this because I just think like, what's the point? Um, but sometimes you'll see comments like that. I don't know why I can't. I think sorry, my font fix is kind of messing up the cursor a little bit. So yeah, sometimes you'll see a comment that looks like that, or usually it'll look like this actually. They'll have two of these things like that. Um, but you don't need to do that. Uh, I usually just do like a multi-comment line comment like that. Oops. Okay. So those are comments, and I'm going to use some comments to explain different parts of our JavaScript program. Um, so eventually we're going to turn this thing into a 3JS thing, which we're going to have to add some other stuff for. But for now, I'm just going to go over some of the basics. So let's see. So, oh yeah, I can collapse this. The arrow looks really, really small. Let me see. There's like a little collapse arrow. It's hard to see on here because my styling is all messed up, but should be easy to see on your machine. So I can collapse that comment if I want to start working on something else. Um, so a couple basic things I want to go over with JavaScript is keywords and different types of text. So in JavaScript, there's a few different types of text. Um, So let's call this types of text in JavaScript. There are keywords. Okay, so keywords are things like function, variable, um, uh, uh, new. There's all these different keywords that when you write it, it can only do one thing. Function, var, const, let, for a for loop, if, else, uh, all of these different things that we use to make code statements and control flow and code blocks and stuff like that. These are called keywords. So let's put a colon here. So those keywords always mean the same thing, unless they're inside of quotation marks, in which case they're a string, and then it's something else. We can't use those keywords for anything else. So JavaScript has a bunch of them. There's probably like a JavaScript list of keywords somewhere. It calls them reserved words, I guess. Uh, oh boy, lexical grammar. Keywords. Okay, there it is, reserved words. So let's put a link to here. So there honestly like aren't that many of them. Like other languages have a ton. But like let's see, const, class, break, uh, if, yeah, we did a lot of these. New, null, return. Um, yeah, these are all the keywords. So let's put a link to this in our notes. So we have keywords, then we have operators. So operators are like equals or gets, double equals, greater, less than, greater than, all of our brackets like square brackets, curly brackets, parentheses, plus, minus, multiply, divide. Um, what else is there? That's kind of like most of them probably. Oh, we can't forget not equals and triple equals and not double equals. So an operator is just like any symbol that tells the code to do something. So when we say x equals 0, x is a variable, equals is the operator, and 0 is the data. So yeah, we have keywords, we have operators, um, we have uh, uh, variables or function names, variable slash function names. So these are the names that we come up with for our variables and functions. These are the parts of the JavaScript that we actually make up ourselves. So things like my variable, my function, setup and draw if you're using P5, other things like that, X, Y, um, what are some other variables? When we create objects, we'll use capital letters. So we'll say like my object or my class. These are just like, those are the things that we can create and we can call them whatever we want to. There's some conventions there, which I'll go over in a second. But yeah, those are the basics. So,
Professor,
yeah,
I have a question. Does glitch work like P5? If you have a variable that you haven't defined, it defines it for you?
yes, JavaScript works the same way everywhere. So uh, Glitch and P5 are both using are both just like editors where we write code. But JavaScript works the same way no matter what environment we're in. So yeah, that's a good question. Um, okay, so we have keywords, we have operators, we have variables, and then we have data. So data are numbers, strings, booleans. So that could be like the number 100. It could be like the string 100 or the string. And then booleans are like true and false. So that's pretty much all we have. There's like other things that we use from time to time, but the majority of JavaScript statements use those four types of text. Another operator that I forgot is the semicolon, which is what every single line of JavaScript should end with. Um, Let's put semicolon at the beginning actually, because it's a good one. Semicolon. Okay. So these are all the different types of text that you use when you make a JavaScript statement. So if we write a JavaScript statement, so let's write like var um, uh, my variable equals hello world. Okay, so this is like a just really, really basic JavaScript statement. So the var part is a keyword. That's usually going to be highlighted by whatever text editor you're using. In this case, we can see glitch is making it this sort of like cyan, light green color. Um, then my variable is the name of the variable that we're creating. So quick note on camel case. Let's put this down here. Camel case. For variables and functions, we use this thing called camel case, which means that the first letter is always lowercase unless it's an object. Uh, and then a word that comes after the first word is going to be capitalized. So that makes it more readable. So my variable becomes my variable. Okay, so compare my variable to my variable. This one you know you can read it or whatever if you spell it right, but it looks like one word. It's hard to understand what's going on there. Versus my variable, it's very easy to see that this is one word, two words. So functions work the same way. We have my function. um, Objects are the one part where they would be different. You guys probably haven't really worked with objects, but if you have an object you would say my object. Same thing with my class. So we with objects and classes, we actually start with a capital letter. That's the only difference between how that's a convention. It doesn't actually change the functionality, but that's just a convention. You use a capital letter to just show in your code. It just makes it easier to read. Okay, this is an object, this is a function, this is a variable. So those are some of the basics. So then we have another space here. So spaces are also important. Spaces indicate like I'm moving from one type of text to another. So we have a variable, we have a space, we have the name of the variable, we have another space, we have our operator. This is the assignment operator. So remember that a single equal sign means that this variable gets this value. And so my variable equals hello world. That value is a string because it's got two quotation marks on either side. Remember in JavaScript, you can use either single or double quotation marks. It doesn't make a difference which one you use. And then in between those quotation marks, I can put whatever I want as long as it's an alphanumeric or symbol character. And then to end my statement, I have my little semicolon. So that's how I create a variable. Let's create a function. So if I want a new function, I start with the function keyword. And for my function, let's call this log my variable. So we're just going to give the function a name that says what it does. Um, and then for our variable, remember we can't use var because that's a keyword, so we can call it variable. So that'll be our argument for our function. I probably did that too fast, so let's do it again. So for my function, just like I have var, I have the keyword function, and then I have a space before I create the name of my function. So the function name is log my variable. It's actually three words, so there's two capital letters, and we're just going to log whatever variable we put in here. So we're going to take an argument and we're going to call it variable. So when I create a function, I put parentheses at the end of the name. That's the difference between a function and a variable, or one difference is the function is always followed by those parentheses. And inside those parentheses, we don't have to, but we have the option of putting an argument or a parameter, and that changes what happens inside of the function. After the parentheses come our friendly curly brackets, which create our new code scope. So it's creating a new block of code that's separate from the rest of our code. And the curly brackets, they're just the curly brackets. You have to hold shift and hit the square brackets to get them. They're kind of hard to find sometimes, but that's where they are. And usually the same thing happened with my parentheses as my curly brackets in Glitch, and you're probably used to this it does it in P5 and it does it if you've used like Sublime Text or whatever in the past. If I hit a parentheses to the open one, the 9, holding shift and hitting 9, it's almost always just going to create the second one for me because it's just assuming, okay, if you're opening a parentheses and you're writing code, you're probably going to close the parentheses. So it opens and closes those for me, and I can write something in the middle, variable. And then same thing with the curly brackets. If I hit an open curly bracket, it's already created that second curly bracket for me. And then I can hit enter and go to my new line and my new code scope. So let's talk about that as well. Once we get inside these curly brackets, there's no semicolon here because this isn't a statement. This is a control function or a control flow thing. So I'm creating a new block of code rather than like executing a line of code. So there's no semicolon down here, but lines that go inside of here will have semicolons. And once we're inside those curly brackets, we indent over because we're starting a new block of code. And we want to be able to see visually where my code starts and ends. So what I'm going to do in my function is I'm just going to console.log the variable. Um, and yeah, that's just my line of code. And so we want this to be indented over so that we can see it's inside this function. Like if I close this function, all of that is in there. If it was not indented, if it was like here, sorry, if it was like over here, then we don't have a lot of code, so it doesn't really look, it's not that hard to read, but it doesn't make it clear where my code block starts and ends. So a nice thing that we can do in Glitch and most of these text editors is just do a format and it'll just do the indent for me. It probably maybe did some weird stuff to my comments too. No, it didn't. Okay, that looks fine. Okay. Okay, so we're almost done with our basics overview. We've written a function, but it's not going to run, is it? Because we haven't called it. So let's go back to our preview window and open our little console. And we would think that it would log our variable, but it doesn't. There's nothing in the console. It's completely blank. So even though we've defined this function, we haven't actually called the function. So remember that a function, defining a function is just saying this function exists, but it's not going to run unless we ask it to run. So to run our function, we have to say log my variable, and then we're going to put my variable as the argument. This is like not a like normal smart program to write, but just for this example. So I created my variable up here, and then I put my variable into this argument here, and that's going to send it to this variable, and then it's going to get logged in this statement. So that's kind of, our code is like kind of like moving around and doing crazy stuff, but we're going to see this run. So there we go. Now we're back where we've run this script, and we can even see it's on script line 29. And if I go to my source, I can actually just see all of my code in here, but we don't really need to look at that right now. So there is the result of my function. So we can see my function actually got run, which is very cool. If I didn't put this here, you might have a guess of what will happen. I might get an error. Um, I might, something else might happen. Oh, I get undefined. So it's actually not an error, but it's just telling me this variable that I'm trying to log is not defined. So we can add some more code to deal with that in a second, but let's pause for a second. Um, any questions so far on our basic syntax for JavaScript? Okay, everybody's good. This looks familiar. It should look at least somewhat similar to some code that you wrote last semester or whenever you took MMP 210. But yeah, we want to make sure we've got the basics down because especially when we're getting into 3JS, we're going to be jumping into the deep water pretty soon.
Yes, I got it. I've been using JavaScript a lot during the summer.
Awesome. Okay, so this is probably kind of boring, but that's okay. We'll move on from this in a second. Um, so let's look at a couple more things and then um, let's see, we have like, okay, we only have like 15 minutes left. So maybe, let's see, what did I go over so far? We talked about the types of JavaScript. We went over camel case. We went over data. Um, all right, let's write a simple if statement just so we can do a little bit more here, and then I think we'll probably be good. We'll just do 3JS next time. Okay, so this variable was undefined. So something I can do in my function to check if my variable exists is I could say if, and then I could say no variable. So if no variable, there's a couple things that I could deal with this. So a couple things there. So remember, if is this another JavaScript keyword that's basically making a decision. If something is true, do something. If something's not true, do something else. In this case, I'm saying if there's no variable. Whoa. Sorry, the lights just turned off in the room for some reason. I don't know if I guess, oh, you guys can still see me on here, so I'll just leave it for now. Anyway, so if there's no variable, so when I make an if statement, I start with if. Usually, as I do with other control statements, I put some parentheses, and then I put what I want to evaluate in here. So the thing I want to check is whether this variable exists. So if I say if there is no variable, there's a couple things I can do to deal with this. So after my if statement, I'm going to put some more curly brackets. So I'm opening a new control flow. And so you can see I've got this one block inside of my other block. So that's why I want to make sure to have everything nice and formatted in my syntax so it's easy to read. So if there's no variable, there's a couple things I could do. I could just return. Okay, so that would just make my function not run at all. So let's see what that would look like. So let's reload. So now nothing happens. There's nothing in the console whatsoever. So when I return from a function, I never even get to this part. The return statement just says like, okay, this didn't work. Like, let's get out of here. Um, I could also do something before I return. So I could say, if there's no variable, console.log, you forgot your variable. Okay, so we'll log something else to our developer. So let's try that again. I'm going to reload. And there we go. We get you forgot your variable. Okay, and then we return, so we never make it to this console.log because we know if there is no variable, then this isn't going to work. We could also assign the variable something here. So if we don't want to do that, let's comment this out. Oh, another real quick thing just to remember, if I hit control and then forward slash or question mark on the keyboard, or if you do it, if you're on a Mac, it's probably command, it'll just comment out that line of code for you. So you don't have to like go to the front and type 2 slashes. You can just hit control slash and it'll put it in there for you. Okay, so let's say we don't want to return, we just want to assign the variable something. We could say variable equals my variable. So this could be like kind of our default value. Okay, so let's try that one. I keep saving because I'm so used to it, even though I don't need to. There we go. There's my variable. So we can see we've changed the variable. So if the user didn't put in a variable, we'll just create it for them. We'll just make up their variable for them. So now we can have log my variable, and we can have log my variable with my variable. Okay, and let's see that go. Okay, there we go. My variable and hello world. So yeah, I think this is a pretty good overview of some syntax stuff. We don't have a ton of time left in class, so I don't think we have time to get into adding 3JS, but we'll start there next week. We don't have class Monday because it's Labor Day, but we do have class next Wednesday, so we'll get into 3JS stuff. And yeah, what we'll do is just like add the library and just set up a basic project. If you're curious to take a look at that, just go to 3js.org, their main websites. I'll put that in the chat. And you can get started pretty easily if you go to examples. Or wait, uh, oh yeah, no, if you go to docs and go to creating a scene, we'll basically just start here, and we'll add some stuff in here. But another thing that we'll use that'll kind of make things a little bit more fun is the editor. They have their own editor that you can use online. So if you're like, some of you guys might be, well, I don't know, actually, I don't think any of you are, but if you've done some 3D animation classes, like you've taken Animation 401 or something like that, you may be able to create your own 3D scenes in like Cinema 4D or Blender or whatever. But you can also use the 3JS editor to make scenes. And the cool thing about that is that you can create a scene and then export it and import it into your own project. So that's something that we'll go over after we kind of go over the basics. But you can kind of see what you can do with 3JS in here. So that's a good thing to check out. And then another thing to look at is just the examples. So you can see lots of different stuff that you can do in here. So you might be like, what kind of shapes can I make? And so there's probably an example. Whoops, shapes. So you can look at shapes and it'll show you, oh, here's all the different types of shapes that you can make. Here's some geometry. Most of these are interactive, so you can move them around and look at them. And the cool thing about all these examples, if you look in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a little like square bracket or angle bracket, sorry, uh, button right there. And if you click on that, it'll take you to the code that created the example you're looking at. The way that 3JS works is a little bit different from how we're going to use it. So you can kind of ignore this part because that's not what we're going to do. But you can, everything else that comes after that, like starting here, we are going to do. So everything else from here on works exactly the same way. So yeah, you can see all the code that actually makes that work, and you can copy it and paste it into your project and use it there as well. So yeah, so there's a few things that you could explore if you want to check out some stuff for 3JS. Um, so let's see. We'll get started with that next week. I'm going to stop recording.